But what I'm going to address here is to end the series, why RSS uh, and social explosion. I wanted to make sure that I didn't mislead you in any way. When I talk about the server we've set up to get indexing the status updates and the social accounts, I want you to understand that that's only one aspect of what you do, because the indexing or when something gets crawled, it doesn't necessarily get indexed. So what we do is we make sure that we ping all of these accounts. They go everything on our entire social network, Twitter, Pinterest, the tens of thousands of accounts of Delicious, Digo, everything that we have, and any other social accounts we'll adding in the future. The big task that we have is just like Linklicious or Indexer or all these other tools. We run that same process through a couple of proprietary methods, and we get them what's called pinged. And what pinging does, this is the most important. A lot of people don't know the difference between getting something indexed versus what we call crawled. So we get Google to crawl everything. Now keep in mind that Twitter is literally, Twitter and Pinterest, and they're generating billions of posts, literally close to 1 billion posts per month, okay, with everybody using them. Google is a limited resource. You can consider Google to be this gigantic series of server farms that's just trying to keep these status updates. The status updates have very low power. Okay, they have very low page authority, and even though they might have domain authority, can you imagine trying to be Google, a search engine, and getting 1 billion status updates per week and millions per day, all trying to get them indexed on Google? Now, if you go back in some of my early writings on Network Empire News, where I talk about how the early days, you'll read some of my articles where Twitter status update pages were having a hard time getting indexed in the search engine. And Matt Cutts actually addressed that directly. They changed their relationship with Twitter, and it became much more difficult to get a status update actually indexed. So this is what I'm going to discuss with you today. I'm going to give you a special treat of some advanced training, spoken to you as if I am 12 years old, spoken because this is what I need my team when they're dumbing things down for me. I need to be talked to like I'm a 12 to 16-year-old in order to understand this stuff. Okay, and I figure that maybe if I pass this on to you, it might be helpful. Please understand, in no way am I trying to make you feel stupid. I actually, when I'm sitting with people like Jimmy and Sue and Matt, Kevin, rest of my team, I will often just tell them, hey, slow down. I don't understand what you're saying. Tell it to me like I'm a 12-year-old. As soon as they do that, I begin to understand what's going on. And so all of this experimental rapid visualization is my attempt to explain it to you. And I hope that this is very helpful. And we're going to get into some pretty cool things. Hopefully you'll begin to understand like the difference between crawled and indexed. Everything that we do gets crawled. Everything, when you syndicate a post, they're going to get crawled. And this is where we're going to get into some fun stuff. And I'm going to talk to you about it best I can. Don't try to get it all at once. For those of you who haven't seen the previous videos, why RSS part 1, 2, and 3, this is going to look like gobbledygook to you. It's going to look like I spilled my dinner on the page here. So go back and watch 1, 2, and especially 3. Otherwise, this will make no sense. These green arrows, green means trust. And then sometimes it means page authority or power. But it has to do with SEO. The green arrows are all SEO, meaning giving you juice of varying power and trust. Okay? In order to do that, we have to both ping and, which means to crawl, get them crawled by Google, as well as index. Now, here's some interesting things. So what that means, let's take it from what happens when you post something with Social Explosion. Here's your blog. That's your domain. Okay. Here's a post. Okay. And it triggers the Social Explosion depending upon how you've scheduled it. Okay. We'll just use red arrows because remember how red equals content. Content equals red arrow. And so we have the post. As soon as that happens, it's sent over to, let's go ahead and just create our whole little thing here. Here's the big bad API for Social Explosion. This is our back end. So it's sent over to our big back end here, where it's scheduled, okay, and then it goes out to our giant social signal exchange network, okay, social signal exchange network, the network empire social signal exchange network. We've got Twitter, Pinterest, Digo, Delicious right now, and probably more to come. And of course, for my rapid visualization techniques here, I am doing all kinds of funny business, just like I'm in the 3rd grade here, and just creating dots to represent. It would be impossible for me to represent 10,000 counts each, okay, or more. So what I do is I create these dots, these groupings. So that's Twitter. It's this giant Christmas tree full of thousands of counts. This is Pinterest. Probably should be a different color. These are all the places that you get published to. And the amount of publishing depends on which tokens and credits you have. How often is the wpsocialexplosion.com/calculator. You can decide how much you want to spend, because I realize we're all on a different budget, myself included. So this is my way of diagramming thousands of social explosion signals and accounts to different accounts. And in the process of explaining this to you, I'm going to explain some pretty cool SEO techniques and hopefully, or at least some definitions, as if I was a 12-year-old. Okay. So what happens here is that we republish, I'm using the red arrow because that means content, to all these locations. And then you actually get published thousands of times. And what is published? Your link shortener. Okay, see what's happening here? Okay, and this is going to depend on how many posts per day you get. Okay, it's going to be, again, dependent upon what you're doing at wpsocialexplosion.com/calculator. You guys know how that works. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Let's hide trust rank. Let's actually bring trust rank up because it actually comes into play. It's very interesting. Jimmy talks a lot about this. I'm going to talk to you about how this all connects. So this is a little bit what happens. Okay, and it gets scheduled over time. Okay, we do things over time. You continue to get scheduled. Here's my little clock. Okay, depending upon how that schedule is set. Okay, so this is the machine that we have, the Social Explosion API. I'll do another API over here. Okay. Now we maintain these accounts. Okay. Of course, if you turn on your individual personal accounts, I think you have one each inside the plugin. That's cool in your plugins area. That's really up to you. Like I said in the last video, it's not really what I focus on with that plugin. It works great. I mean, I use it, but it's kind of like comparing a firecracker to a 20 megaton neutron bomb. It's kind of anticlimactic when you just oppose them together when you compare them. So it's not really my focus, but it's also a nice handy thing to have. Now, what we do back here also is we have a server where we both ping, which is the same as getting them crawled. Darn it. Crawled. Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, ping and crawl means that we expose all of these accounts, our entire social empire, the thousands of accounts owned by individuals who have these accounts and networks of sites from various locations. And we make sure we force Google and other search engines to crawl them. Now, what happens when you get them crawled is that is what increases the trust to your site. Another name for trust is domain authority. Domain authority, and again, let's go ahead and go over to Moz. Domain authority is represents by Moz best prediction of how a website will perform. Now here's where things get a little bit weird, because I know you guys only have the tools that are in front of you. Okay, and we all have the Moz toolbar and so on and so forth. You can see that my page authority right here is 29. My domain authority is 37. This is for my wiki, right? How accurate is that? One thing I want to have you guys recognize, and this is where it gets tricky. I had to decide whether or not I wanted to talk to you about this. But trust is domain authority. You don't have to have all of these status updates. Do not. In the previous video, I said they get indexed as well. Some of them do. Okay. But not all of them do. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about this is that this is more important to me than indexed. Indexed is great, but the indexability of a social status update is going to depend upon its power. So the power of our social accounts is increasing over time. We cultivate. The power of our network is growing. The power of how we build, the extent and the time frame in which we build power to all of these social accounts. And right here, we're talking about a minimum of 100,000 and growing. I'd have to confirm that, but okay. To build power, you have to have all kinds of retweets and backlinks to backlinks, and we have that. There's a percentage of accounts. There's varying degrees of quality. But what's important is the domain authority that you're automatically getting. Okay? And domain authority happens through pinging. Domain authority is another way to look at trust rank. It's another way to look at you're probably lost in a sea of definitions through Kemper, through link research tools, through Moz, Moz rank, Moz trust. There are so many ways of describing the same thing through PageRank, which has been deprecated, right? Google's old thing. The only thing you need to understand is getting you crawled. Remember, SEO equals green. Talking DA, PA, and trust. Okay? So we get you pinged and crawled, and what's going to happen is these networks will then begin to increase your domain authority. And by default, you're also going to be getting a certain degree. By the sheer volume of social status updates, you'll be getting a certain degree of power. Mostly what happens faster is domain authority. So you should see an increase of domain authority site-wide. Now remember, domain authority is a Moz tool. And crawled social accounts do not necessarily come up on the Moz toolbar. That's the first and foremost thing that I want you to understand, is that you can be developing domain authority. We have had countless testimonials on authority going up measurably. But we've also had countless testimonials by rankings going up, and people who are watching the toolbar and not their rankings are not getting the same effect, because domain authority, over 30 to 90 days, you'll see the DA move in most cases. But you should definitely see ranking move depending upon your strategy overall. Okay, so in order to really look at why this is true, I don't want to stay too focused on social explosion. Just wanted you to understand the difference between crawled or pinged and indexed. Okay, index gives you power. Crawl gives you trust. Now we're going to get into some weird things, just for a minute. Hopefully you understand this, that the crawlability of our entire social network to increase your DA is the first and foremost. This is unheard of, that this kind of safety, this kind of automated DA. And it is the lazy person's trust building. Okay? But why, you might say? Why does a social account create trust or domain authority? Domain authority is Moz's specific way of talking about trust. There's other tools that you can use. Jimmy uses a variety of different ways to discuss trust, but we default to DA because it's the most common way to measure it, and it's the easiest toolbar. Okay? And by no means should you limit yourself to that. There's power times trust and all these other things. We're going to get into that a little bit today. What is, you'll hear Jimmy talk about seed sites and all these types of things. Okay, that's really from the study in trust rank, which we talk about in some of our training. Okay, this is really the original work from Stanford by Zoltan and Hector, Stanford University. And Jan Peterson of Yahoo as well talked a lot about it. And you'll hear Jimmy and Sue talk a lot about this. And it's a little bit confusing. If you hate math at all, then just look at the pretty pictures, and hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. It's quite simple. And to explain it as if I was explaining it to a 12-year-old, if this is your website, what they did is they came up with an algorithm. If this is your website, your money site, okay, and just using the Moz toolbar, if you have low domain authority and low page authority, and like none of your pages have any page authority, what that means is that you have low trust and low power. Okay, so people try to build that stuff up. Okay, this is a way of explaining the physics behind why social explosion and any other methods, including our more advanced methods that take more work, that are less for lazy people like domain authority stacking, why they work. Well, Zoltan and Hector came up with an algorithm that said basically, okay, the closer your site is to spamdex sites or spamming sites, in other words, sites that also have low trust and low power. Let's go ahead and put a couple of sites out here. If you're one jump away from those sites, and we're just going to do, now that you know what this means up here, we're just going to do low, 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 okay? If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it is a duck, according to trust rank models. In other words, just in a super simple way, if you're getting link juice consistently and on average, not just one at a time, but the whole aggregate math, if you were to take a big giant calculator in the sky, and even if there are 5,000 of these, all coming to your money site, then you too are associated with the spam site, right? And that's called antitrust rank. Quite literally, they had a algae called antitrust rank. The logic works the opposite way, and we're going to show you to create trust rank. And this is really the root behind domain authority stacking or anything else. Now there's some sophistications and some little known myths that need to be broken that we teach you. But this is the core. And this is the problem with what people do is then they talk about tiered ranking. And it's really kind of a misnomer because what they try to do is they try to get layers and layers away from this. So the idea, would be get further away. Let's go ahead and just look at this. What they're saying here is many web spam pages, you can look up here on the other screen. Many web spam pages are created only with the intention of misleading the search engines. Gosh, you got that. Complex linking schemes. TrustRank seeks to combat spam by filtering the web based on reliability. This method calls for, here's what I really want you to get your head around. This method calls for selecting a small seed set of pages to be evaluated by an expert. So in the Stanford study, this was the key point. Somebody had to go through by hand and decide, okay, let's create a weird algorithm here. This is really, Google was the first to really do this in the beginning. When they were creating the trust ranked giant algorithm, some guy decided to put on this giant pile Wikipedia, okay, and they had certain factors, Amazon, YouTube, And the factors that they chose trusted site, meaning they had to create a baseline of absolute 0. Okay, so this would be 100. 100. And MozRank, Domain Authority tried to do this as well. PageRank worked on a similar algorithm, but except quite a bit less interesting. In fact, it might have been obfuscated intentionally, in my opinion. But what it really was is they took this pile of of websites, and for the sake of their algorithm, when they got their calculator out, they said, okay, we're going to have a person, a human being. I'm going to draw you a nice stick person because I'm such a great artist. I'll put a hat on. I would paint this hat black. Black hat SEO. And they took this, somebody had to decide what these sites were. And back in the day, it was the DMOZ directory. It was a hand-curated directory. Okay, and not so much anymore. So they took these sites that were like information reference sites that the purpose was non-commercial. Okay, and in their algorithm, they did this gigantic calculation divided by the square root of divisible by infinity. This is fancy math. This is why you need a computer. And then they decided that when they created this score, that anything in circumference from this, okay, and this is a huge oversimplification, okay? Huge oversimplification. This is not really a tier because it's nonlinear, but most of us think in terms of a tier, okay? That the further away any website or network of websites were from this ground zero, the less likely they are to be not only useful, but trustworthy. Does that make sense? We're talking about trust rank here. This was the first weird thing that happened on the search engine. So for instance, if your site is out here, and it's not even to put your site, let's say you just submitted your site, and it's only been around for 2 months. It's not even here. They haven't even crawled it yet. If the only thing that you have is this cluster that's how many jumps away, let's say this is 1 jump. This is 20 jumps. That's a few. Actually, let's just go to 4. Because this is really where a lot of the controversy lies, is how many jumps should you be? And this is really the closest thing to tiers that you have. Is it 4 jumps? Is it 10 jumps? Is it 100? How far do they really crawl and how far do they really compare? Well, that's why you need a really big computer. I believe that the entire process of web architecture is being completely non-linear. Like there's giant calculations going to be happening with quantum computing. Well, they'll be determining instantly the value of these things. So if, let's say, the furthest is away, let's say these are 100 jumps, and all of these sites have low trust and low power, low and low. Okay? And so what happens is you have up here, you have high trust and high power. And it's important that you know what those mean. Okay? Trust would be like domain authority. Domain authority would be a good way to translate that. The reason that Jimmy uses domain authority is it's easy because Moz has done a lot of work to make it easily accessible with a toolbar. Does that make sense? Because you have a toolbar and you have those tools, we'll make a little red hat here for him. Because you have that toolbar, it's easy for us to talk about domain authorities being 100 being the best and 0 being the worst. Okay, but we're really talking about trust. And I think people do get confused that when we say DA, domain authority, equals trust, not power. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves then, what is power? Trust was really derived on a similar, although Moz does this quite a bit different than the original trust rank. There's a relationship. You'll see a lot of these guys, okay, evaluated by an expert. Well, Moz found an algorithm to try to correspond because there's not a human being that's going to go to every single high authority site on the web. Although I do believe, in order to get a 100, that a manual reviewer probably is present. Okay, because 100 is like everybody's heard of it. It's high popularity. In fact, if you look at the definition of Moz Trust is about popularity. And Again, that's where things get weird. So what you would really see as you moved from ground zero out to the outer darkness, out to the spam decks, pure spam decks, as they call it, would be low and low. No trust, no power. Okay? Meaning there's no links. When you think power, think links to those links. High quality, trusted links to those links. Domain authority stacking, as taught by the team, is really about manipulating all of that factor to take a low trust and a low power situation and make sure that you're getting some power from powerful places. Okay. Once you understand that, it's not about templates. This is why people keep asking us for templates. You need to understand this principle and not ask for templates, because the more templates you give away, the less trust those templates have and the less power. Okay. You can't really destroy trust of high domain authority sites by giving away templates and creating footprints, say, if a bunch of people have the same pattern. But what you can destroy is power. They can take the power away of certain combinations of those types of things. Okay, so all of this being said, you would see as you moved towards the trusted site, you would see an increase of trust and hopefully an increase of power as you got towards ground zero, okay, which is here. So this is really how all of that was created. Now, here's what's weird. When you're dealing with social accounts, remember we talked about the method, this method of trust rank calls for, here it is up on the screen again, calls for selecting a small set of seed pages to be evaluated by an expert. Well, then let's go back to the idea of social explosion or any other methods. Okay. What does social explosion use? Twitter, Pinterest, Diego, and Delicious, with others very likely to come. So are these part of a core seed set that have high domain authority? Yes, which means high trust. So let's make that really, really clear. Okay, so we have DA 100, we have 100 for Pinterest, we have, I think, 90 something for Digo. Anybody know what Digo is? Let's go ahead and look at it. I think it's 90 something, 95 plus. Delicious, 90 plus. Okay. So again, you've got trust, okay, also indicated by domain authority. But a backlink, a subpage, a status update doesn't have any page authority, otherwise known as power. Because until you have things pointing to those status updates, you won't have any power to them. This is why retweets and these types of things are very important, all being gradually incorporated into social explosion. We're only in phase 1. But the holy grail is obviously to be able to give you both power and trust automatically. That is the one thing that Google never wants to have happen. And that's what you really need to understand about social explosion in general, and why it's key for you to understand that when we're working with social explosion, we crawl the heck out of every thousands of accounts, and all the owners in these accounts get crawled in order to increase that trust. But not every single account is going to necessarily get indexed. There's thousands of very, very large software organizations around the world trying desperately hard to get every single Twitter account and status update indexed, including Twitter themselves. Twitter, when Google came to Twitter, there was this big, in about 3 years back, said we are no longer going to index all of your Twitter updates anymore because we can't handle them. There's 1 billion a day or something absurd a week. So what that really means is that if your Twitter profile has a lot of trust and a lot of power, you have more likely that your status updates are going to be crawled. Okay, let's go ahead and draw all this out because that's how we get it, right? Whoops, it's the wrong one. So let's go back to our little diagram. So the domain that you have your status update on might have a lot, it might have a, you already know that no matter what, your Twitter itself has high trust. It's a domain authority of 100, but you're a sub-account within that. Twitter/themezoom. And you saw before that Twitter/themezoom has something like a domain authority of a certain amount. And, well, let's take a look at this. You can see, for instance, if we go to twitter.com/themezoom, this is a top-level domain we call WR1. Okay. A top-level social account, meaning our branded social account. So it's got a page authority of 48 and a domain authority of 1,000. It's a little bit easier for me to get crawled than, say, a brand new site because it's starting to develop power. But if you go deeper into the status update, okay, you go right into the status update itself. This is a sub-page even deeper. Okay, I would have to do a refresh for the Moz tool. And the Moz tool is going to do the best that it can, for instance, to try to ascertain what's going on here. But you can see that my domain authority, my trust is still very high because courtesy of Twitter is sitting here. But the page authority on this is pretty low. You can see it does actually have a page authority. That means this status update has probably got a link pointing to it. It's either been retweeted, and I can tell you what it is, as I run all my tweets through Scoop It, and that's probably what it is. Okay. Also, Twyla automatically publishes your tweets as well. So I do a few things with my top-level Twitter account that actually gives them power. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay. And Social Explosion is growing every day to be able to increase power. Right now we're focused mostly on trust. Okay, just by default. Okay, and over time you'll see this type of thing. So this is what I wanted to really express to you, is that these seed sites, this is the reason that we use Social Explosion in the way that we do. And that the essential element is that it gets crawled. Another thing worthy of note, since we're getting political here, by looking at, okay, even in the original trust rank algorithm, somebody sat down and chose some set number of sites or some sample set and determined, hey, these are both trustworthy and awesome, and they have a lot of power as well. To walk backwards to this weird algorithm that everybody hijacks, such as Moz and Kemper and ranking tools, link research tools, and all these guys, cognitive SEO. We all started using these different things. So what's interesting is that how do you know then, okay, if that's political to us, in other words, a human was involved, let's go ahead and then look. Remember that if you go to your Google Analytics tool and you look inside of here and you go to, for example, the Data Hub activity, this is a little window into the politics of Google. Click on your Data Hub activity in any one of your accounts and you'll see that I'm not talking about the metrics here because you're not going to get any metrics unless you give them access to these social syndication platforms, okay? But what I do want to point out here is just simply the Data Hub partners. You can find out more about Data Hub partners. Data Hub partners come and go. Quora used to be on here until they flipped Google the bird. Several partners, because it is all very political. Because really what's happening here is if anything is on these sites, if anything is in the Google Data Hub partner, whatever their domain authority is, in other words, their trust, they can stand alone. The Moz tool will of course provide trust values based on their algorithm, regardless of whether or not they're Google Data Hub partners. But Data Hub partners are social sites usually. So all of these have the thumbs up from Google, which probably means that their trustworthiness, even if the Moz toolbar broke tomorrow and there was no more domain authority available to us, we would automatically assume that these are high domain authority. Okay? So at that point, using Jimmy's method and domain authority stacking and Social Explosion, all these things, when you can get pages on these things, just like my Twitter account is a subset, right, of a domain authority 100, and it's a 48 page authority for my profile area, means my trust for that, it's a trusted Twitter account. I think it's a 45. And then underneath that, I've got my status update. Where my link shortener is going to be. That's going to have even less power unless I power up those locations. So us getting those crawled for you is very, very helpful because you're still going to get that crawlability back to the site. You're still going to get the authority. That stuff is cumulative over time, even though it has a low page authority. Getting them crawled, even when they're not indexed. Okay? But more importantly, the politics of what is a trusted site and how that works. The Data Hub partners, of course, is just a small fraction of sites, but these are also very interesting. One of the reasons Digo and Delicious are useful is because they're there. Okay? I'm giving you a hint here, folks. There might be other accounts that we eventually add, okay? But there's things that you can use in the Data Hub partners to also do that. I'm not going to come out and say it in this video, but you get the idea. Some of you are already using Discus, for example, for comments. There's all these other locations that when you start following the domain authority stacking strategies, you're going to kind of understand the principles rather than the templates. Things get a little bit more powerful for you personally because you don't always want to share every single powerful location you have. Trust, we can all agree on. We can give you a list of trusted sites. Google just did it right there inside the Google Hub partners. But one of the things you want to consider twice before sharing is power, places, locations that are easy to generate power. That is, you have access to those sites to juice them up. Okay? And here's one of the things that happens that's wrong with domain authority stacking people and GSA and all these different services is they continue to build antitrust rank by spamming their sites with low power, low trust. Okay? And low power and low trust is a bad idea. Okay? And tools like in the wrong hands, okay? Tools like GSA, Magic Submitter, SE Nuke, Link Emperor, all of these things. In the wrong hands, it's how you use it. But in the wrong hands, they're extremely problematic because they're going to give you, they're just going to shower your primary site with spam decks. Low trust, right? I got an idea. Let's create a bunch of low trust because the links have to come from somewhere. This is why Jimmy spent so much time focusing on how to acquire proper link lists. Because if those link lists have low trust and low power, some people think, oh, if I get enough low power links to my site, even though I'm going to build my authority somehow, my trust somehow, not recommended. You want the least number of jumps from the highest powered and highest trusted domains to your site. So you don't want to do this. And there's ways to do this, to strategically do this. Don't let anybody ever tell you they're not. Get rid of these things. Disavow, right? Okay. Disavow. Disavow. That's what the traffic hospital stuff all about. If you're already low and low, you need some high authority. Okay. You'd be better off doing anything other than those spam dexing tools. Okay. Even if you had just, if we know that trust is on the top, even if you had high trust and low power. High, low, high, low, high, low. Okay, let's change this one to high, low. What I mean by that is that a high DA and low page authority. We're using the Moz terms for now, but you could call it whatever you want. So that means high DA, low PA. Now, I know that's not optimal, right? You would want high and high. Okay, but you know what? High and low is way better than low and low. You understand what I'm saying? Way better. And that's what Social Explosion delivers. Okay. This is way better than what most people are doing. We only deliver and crawl and get crawled for you high DA. Okay. And some of these even have PA. Okay. Some of them are even low and medium in some cases. And as the network grows and expands, some of these accounts will be, which already are, but you might even get some high in there. So this is the main thing that you want to be aware of. Social Explosion is one of several ways to do this. This is the lazy person's way, because there's just literally nothing to do. My help desk all day long is questions about, do I have to do this, and this to run Social Explosion? The answer is no. Plug it in. Make sure it's running. And if you have any challenges, come to the help desk. That's all you need to do, as long as you don't have a server issue. Okay, or the plugin's not properly updating, which happens occasionally based on the hosting company. Okay, but other than that, there's nothing to do. There's no strategy. Domain authority stacking is another method. This is not a lazy person's, DAS. Okay, this requires some strategy, because with DAS, you can do a whole different type of thing. With DAS, which is manual, it's not automated, you can start manipulating. I know that's a scary word for some people. In a very safe way and sustainable way, you can start getting links that have high domain authority, in other words, high trust, and medium, and in some cases, high power. Okay? So imagine that. Even if you're getting high, medium, high, medium, high, medium by following some of these strategies, and you have to be safely integrated with a teaching process, then you're going to be passing even more ranking power. Okay? But to get high mediums, at least right now, for the most part, you're going to be doing something more than just turning on something and showering, unless you're paying a lot of money. Okay? To get high power and high trust, automatically, you should be paying a lot of money. And if you're not, they're probably lying to you. Okay? So this is why the whole link building promise and the whole war with spam and the whole war with link building, because if you could buy at a reasonable price high power and high trust, and I'm talking high, and my termination of high is very specific, those links should be very expensive, and that's what Google's at war with. If it were cheap to do that and everybody could do it, Google would be out of business and you would only have spam on the top rankings. Okay? So this is really what we're talking about with DAS, is how to do this. And the question then becomes, oh, if this is not tiered link building, then what are you really describing here? Well, the question is not that. The question is, from a trusted site, and this is controversial. This is why we covered it in Google Skyfall. That's why Jimmy and Sue discussed that. Is how deep are they going? When we're stacking to a theme within a site, how deep does Google go on the layers to determine how close you are to a spam dex, to low. In other words, how many, and this is why you got to be careful, because this is not the same tier as tiered linking that we're looking at before. How deep into the domain authority and the page authority stacking is Google looking to determine whether or not you're a trusted site? Right now, Jimmy and Sue have their belief based on massive amounts of data analysis, and you can look at that in our training. I'm not going to get into that here. How far will they eventually go? Will they eventually go 50 layers deep, requiring people to manually stack things 50 layers deep? I don't believe so. But who knows? With quantum computing, maybe the entire framework will change at that point. Well, you will see. But once you understand what's going on, there's another factor in here called theme relevance, which we also teach, which helps a lot to diffuse even that. In other words, there's other transparencies besides just traffic, SEO, and content within our three-dimensional thinking here. There's 4 and 5 dimensions. So when you're really looking at this, we discuss if you're going to be doing serious, if you're trying to get high and medium, or medium, medium, okay, or high and high, these require really good understanding. Okay, that's beyond. Social explosion would be a nice supplement because you're getting all that trust from those trusted social sites and link shorteners. But if you're also trying to get high power, you need to do other things besides just social explosion in order to get your site ranked and into a massive domain and power scenario. Okay, so this is really what TrustRank teaches and what Jimmy talks about as seed site. The main thing to stay away from is anti-trust rank. Just keep those spam farms away from, keep those low farms away from your money site. If your spam decks, if here's the trusted sites, ground zero, okay? And let me move this down here. And this is the spam decks, absolutely low to negative power and negative trust. Don't put your site right here, one jump away. Okay, right? Otherwise, you're going to need traffichospital.com. No, I'm just kidding. In other words, what happens is you can be here, and then negative SEO is really literally about somebody doing this to you. Okay? So what happens when somebody negative SEOs you, right? Well, we use this diagram to show that you would never want to be out here, but what negative SEO is when somebody tries to force you out here. Okay, because it's a diminishing return. If your site, for instance, is here, and let's say you had a, this is super basic here, you guys. Let's say you started out, you had a low domain authority and a low power, okay, meaning not very much page or collective page authority. If someone comes and SEOs you, even if you have like a medium and low, or a medium and medium, what happens is somebody can throw you out there in that outer ring with a bunch of low and low links pointing to you, and you're going to lose your rankings. Okay, if this is your search engine, this is the search engine result page, SERP, and you were right here in terms of trust, ranking, and all the combinations, they can drop you. And if they do enough damage with low, okay, somebody sends a bunch of spam links to you, and they come from a ring that's all low power, low trust, all of them, and they're all pointing to you, you're going to have to disavow. That's somebody trying to get you off the search engines. These are all coming to you from crappy spam gardens, spam dexing. What they've just done is they've officially thrown you away from the circle of trust, which is, as you remember, the trusted ground zero sites that were hand curated. Okay, so they can force that, they can give that illusion, they can get your site, your money site, negative SEO'd. That's what that's called. Now, I'm oversimplifying it. I hope you don't mind, but that's how it works. And then, of course, you lose your search engine rankings pretty quickly because Google, big bad G, says, hey, he's trying to game trust. You're faking your trust by trying to spam dex yourself. And they believe that what you're trying to do is increase your power. When they see you trying to influence your power directly, they just hate you. Okay? And then you've got to go to the hospital. Okay? Which again, this is a course that we teach. It's very important. We try to give everybody a lot of free information on that. If you're in our various courses, if you're in DC or OMG's Director Cut, we give a lot of different things in our variety of joint venture partners. We also have a course on this, traffichospital.com. This is all, that's for really big guns. And this is all about how to properly use disavow. Do not use disavow without training. Don't believe almost anything that you hear about the disavow out there for free on internet land. Everybody from doesn't work to there's no disavow possible to just utter crap. Okay, you need to listen to professionals who are doing this every day, and don't listen to anybody else because they don't know what they're talking about, more or less. Very few. Let me rephrase that. I'm not saying nobody else knows what they're talking about. I'm saying that if it's out there and it's for free, make sure that you understand the experience with which somebody is removing low link spam pointing to your site, because you can get it removed using Kemper tools and using Jimmy and Sue's methods, but you need to make real sure that you know what you're doing. Okay? So this is how it all works. Okay? Now, would there be something that you could do with these spammed links? There are methods, advanced training, where you can do all kinds of things that I'm not supposed to talk about. Otherwise, Sue will spank me and crack whips, and I will be in big trouble. There are things that Jimmy does. Whoops. And that I'm not supposed to talk about. Sorry, I thought I turned the camera off here. And there are little games that you can play. I know that Mike Hayden knows some of these things, and there's 301s and different things. But if you do the wrong thing and you start pointing the wrong jumps to your site, then you can really screw yourself up if you don't know what you're doing with these advanced techniques, with these advanced server pivots, these types of things. Okay, so I hope that has been helpful in understanding what social explosion does. I started out simply wanting you to understand that we crawl everything, and the main takeaway that I'd like you to have, whether you use our products or not, okay, is that crawlability alone is required, as well as other things like engagement rank, but crawlability of high trusted sites is the first step that we do. And the second step then, depending upon the power that develops on those sites over time, is going to develop power. This is one of the reasons that you want to maintain your account with us if you decide to use Social Explosion at all, because over time you will see power increase because of some spooky, crazy, and military level things that we are doing to boost up even power of our massive social networks over time, of which you are distributing your content. My name is Russell Wright, networkempire.com. This has been a 4-part series on why RSS and Social Explosion. Hope you enjoyed it. I do not know how long it is going to be online. You might want to download it. I might be told to remove it immediately. Enjoy.